Welcome to Elemental Hypertech. This is an update regarding the 6th experiment. As you're aware, we performed 5 major experiments on this channel publicly over the past several years. How it started is in 2015, I wrote a book called the Quest Me book, Soul, How, You. Once that book was completed, I went public on the channel to perform the elemental experiments that go with that book. And in that process, a second book was written, which was the public side. While we went through the experiments, we created the second book, which is called Discovery Book, History, Mystery, Gift. That book was completed after the 4 experiments were completed, and those 4 experiments are related to the elements themselves. So the first experiment was the element of air. We called it the Trinity Experiment. We discovered wealth. That was in the mind. The mind is intellect and reason. Those are the properties in which we discovered. Also, regarding time travel, the mind we connected to the past. We did so with the I remember when. This is also where evidence exists. And we connect that experiment through perspective. The second experiment that we performed was called the Lash factor experiment. This experiment was the element of water, the gut. We discovered health and power, the passive feminine aspects as opposed to the mind being the active masculine. With the gut, it's about feelings and emotions. And in time travel, it is connected to our future. Having a relationship with our feelings and our emotions, we can build our timelines as well, our future timelines. And there are several aspects in which you learn at the Elemental Hypertech School that allow this process to take place in a way in which fits your filter and your narrative in your life. Because we all have different belief systems and structures that we've learned and been taught in order to navigate through our world. Some have a religious backing, in other words. Some have a scientific backing. Some are athletic. Some are meditators. So we have modes in which we participate in the world. And with that, when you navigate through the Lash factor experiment, and they are navigators, it's really important because you have aim and purpose, and it's designed with patterns. And this is how you find your path, is you find these patterns. So with that being said, this is why we have to build through your filter, so that way you can have a relationship with it and build upon that based off your truth. Because we all had different experiences, we all come from different places. And that has to be incorporated in there. So here's a couple examples. There is a quantum tunneling system that you can be taught at Elemental Hypertech School. Think of quantum tunneling like if you look at the back of your hand. There are 5 paths, if you will. There's more, but I'm just saying for an example here to show you. There's an infinite number of them. But we don't need to get into that now. That's more the advanced. But there's looking at the back of your hand, and there's 5 paths. Each one of those paths consider those as timelines. Okay? Now each one of those paths has variants to them, and those variants those subtle differences are based off choice. The choices that you make to navigate yourself to where you want to go. So, quantum-wise is that you can duplicate yourself on each one of those timelines. Navigate through the choices that you make to discover, almost like chess, right? When you're playing chess and you make all these different moves and you can see 3 or 4 moves ahead. That's what the technology is supposed to teach you within the Lash factor as well. Because it's future guided. Unlike the mind, which is past guided. Past guided is just as important because you have something solid in evidence. You know, you've been there, done that kind of thing. And the Lash factor is about experience, not evidence. Okay? It's about compassion. So it's pressure, unlike force and temperature of the Trinity experiments. I'm trying to give you an opposite. I'm trying to show you how this is the duality, the dipole of each of these. This is why we did this one second. We did the past first. We did the future second, okay, in the experiment. So you make these choices based off these variants. Now on the third experiment, we did the echo experiment. The echo experiment is the element of fire. And it's in your heart, where your will, your desire, your passion. These are in the ever-present now, in time travel. The moment. And your hands come out of your heart because your hands do not care about the past. They don't care about the future. They care about the now. What are you doing right now? How are you behaving? What is your attitude? How everything pertains to the present moment. So, with that experiment, we have the ability to make changes, to do things differently, to discover new possibilities. Since it is infinite, then everything in between, which is what the echo experiment taught. Remember, don't forget about the pause. It's that in-between moment. When you breathe, outward breath, inward breath, there's that moment in between. That's what we're talking about here. Now with that, an example like I shared with you regarding the quantum duplication effect of you can put yourself on each one of these timelines through choice and build a structure and a model. But this one is more of projection instead of influence. Influence in the gut. You can project with this particular technology. An example of that would be you focus your attention to a place in space or time, and like amplifiers, you move your energy into a given point, something that you can see. Now, when I say that, it doesn't necessarily mean see in front of you. It means that you have clear understanding and focus regarding a particular place. And there's no obstruction between you and that place. That's a key component, because this is by permission. We're not using brute force here, and you can. You focus your attention into that area and you slide through space, if you will, not thrust. And with that slide, you end up at that point of reference from your focus, your aim, in time or space. Now, I know the question is, in time travel, can you do this instantaneously? Well, let me ask you this. Is it too hard to believe if you could? I can talk to a friend 3,000 miles away on my cell phone in real time. The fourth experiment is the private experiment. And this is the body, the element of earth, your form, your style, your substance, your material. What matters to you? And how do you do it? How? The H is health, your inner world, wealth, your outer world, and then the O are the four elements themselves together in harmony. And that's what we discover when you combine these experiments together. You receive memory and harmony, evidence and compassion, joy and purpose. So, Tantra was an aspect of the fourth experiment. Arousal, very intimate processes and structures. It's a difficult experiment because you face many obstacles that have chipped away, if you will, and beat up through your life. So a lot of things you face. I want to share more about that, but the private experiment is just that, private. But I did want to make sure people understood that that experiment was available as well and spoken of, but in a way that was more hidden. The fifth experiment was the world's first time travel game. Started on 8/8 of 2019 and ended on Valentine's Day of 2021. And for the world's first time travel game, the game you play in real life, I wrote a third book. And that book is called Gen Unity Book, Navigator, Dynamo, Explorer. And it's all the rules to the game. It's all the processes and systems, also known as the Hidden Book. And to give you a hint on what you discover within the Gen Unity Book, we explore the colors and how they play a role in time and in space and within yourself. Like the chakras, if you will, were white being at the top, encoded in the time travel game as Uranus. The code word, offering. And then as we move down, the next is purple, which is the sun. The code word, sovereign. When you are a player, director, participator, producer of the world's first time travel game, these become very important skills and talents that you can utilize within your game. Moving down further to blue, which is the throat. Purple would be the third eye. The crown chakra would be white. That can coincidentally and serendipitously be interchanged with black, but that is, again, for the advanced in this game. But back to blue, that is Neptune, the seat of spirit, what you eat, what you say. These are important as well, and the code word is commerce at the throat. As we move further down, we get to green in the heart. Venus. Next, and with green, it's service as the code word. Next is orange. Mercury. The code word, change. The diaphragm, the seat of the soul. And I challenge you, for those who are interested in this game, as you go about your day and you travel, like what you hear in the background, look at these colors around you on the signs. Signs and symbols, right? This is what we learn in the game, how to read signs and symbols. What colors are those signs? When you see the color orange on your travels, does that mean change? When you see a white sign, is that offering you something? When you see a green sign, is it about service? Like a service road, for example. So orange, Mercury, change. The next, yellow, Jupiter, activity. When you see a yellow sign, is there something in motion on that sign? Is there an activity, like a deer crossing or a railroad crossing? Further down in the game, we get to red, Mars, the code word priority. I'm sharing this with you so you have a template, a cipher for how to play the game. Next, you will have, yes, we should continue on, shouldn't we? Should we go to the bottom of our feet? Let's do that. Next, you have brown, Pluto, culture. Now we're getting into the hidden sciences and teaching you beyond within the elemental hypertech system. This is for the advanced when we're moving into these worlds, realms, positions, influences, technologies. After brown comes gray. The moon. Support is the code word. And then we arrive at black. Saturn. Control. Which leads us to the sixth experiment. This experiment is, I'll call it the Serendipity Experiment. Revelation of things, discovery of the truth. Perhaps, if we're lucky. Where all of the experiments come together into one. This one is built in serendipity. To give you an example of this experiment, imagine that you are a scientist making a concoction. You mix them together and you get a reaction, and that reaction is the same every single time you do it, and this is your job. Like, say, or like if you're a spice maker and you have to have this certain number of spices, everything has its own ratio. Okay, that's important. An angle, and these, you put this together. However, what happens one day when you're doing this 1,000 times, and then there's that one time you do it and something different happens? Yet it was the same process. That unique and novel, spontaneous action. How do you recreate that difference? And you can't do it. You keep trying to recreate it, but it's not happening. That moment, that different thing that took place, that you don't quite understand why that happened, even though everything else was the same, all the variables were the same, but yet it gave a different reaction. And when you try to duplicate that, you can't necessarily duplicate it. And if you're lucky, and that's a key word here with this experiment, you may be able to. But the serendipity is that moment that was different, yet all the same systems were working according to plan. So I welcome you to the sixth experiment.